So it's really an honor, and I'm just so excited to be standing in front of all of you today to welcome you to the second annual symposium of the MIT Center for Constructive Communication. Good morning and welcome. I want to begin by just acknowledging the moment that our community is in this campus, a moment of unrest and conflict. A dynamic that is playing out, of course, on many college campuses around the country and reflects the greater unrest in the world around us. And I also want to note the fundamental connection between the topic that brings us all here together today, trust and human connection, and the technological factors of AI and social networks that are transforming these human elements. My hope is by the end of today, you will have gone through a day of dialogue and exploration and learning, and that it will spark new ideas, new connections, that you'll be able to bring those out of the day into as you go forward. By the way, there's lots of chairs on this side, so you guys don't be shy. Just drift over, because we're going to be sitting for the next hour and a half. So come on over. Don't just linger. Take a moment and just make your way in. I see all these empty chairs here. So by the numbers today, what you can expect: 3 fireside chats, the first coming up in a few minutes, 6 workshops that we have arranged for you. By the way, the workshops, there is a table over there with descriptions of the 6 workshops. Could you please, when we break for open house, stop by if you haven't already and sign up for the 2 out of 6 workshops that you're most interested in. We have 22 demos and an open house later this morning, and 175 amazing human beings. And so just to give a sense of who's in the room, if you'll humor me and get ready to stand, if you are part of the C3 core team, please stand up and remain standing. Let's just try this and see. No, there's all these folks in the back. Are you actually all C3? That kind of foils, I think. All right, put your hand up as well if you are C3. Thank you. If you're part of the Cortico team, a closely affiliated nonprofit, please stand up. Team Cortico, and remain standing, please. If you're an advisor to Cortico or C3, please stand up. If you're part of the MIT larger community that we're building more and more connections with, any part of MIT, please stand up. And if you're part of our extended network, which is part of why we're all together, community organizations, partners that are working with C3, working with Cortico, supporting us, funding us, if any of those categories, please stand up. Yeah, you can stand up. And if you haven't stood up yet, please now stand. And I present to you the label for your category, a question, which is, are you about to become one of this group? That's our hope. Thank you. You can have a seat. So there's a lot of organizations represented in this room, and just to give you a sense, I did a little exercise in coloring green, the subset that we're already working with. And again, just the idea here is to build a network, not necessarily to all collaborate on one big thing, but to learn from each other and hopefully find more and more connections. We're going to ask you all to operate under the Chatham House rule, which means feel free to take any ideas that come out of the day with you. But if you wish to cite someone with attribution, quote someone, please get the permission first. Otherwise, please don't. We're going to be recording the fireside chats and the workshops, and we are also going to apply the Chatham House rule to those recordings. We won't publish anything with attribution without going to you first for permission. I want to play now a 1-minute video just to set the stage for what is C3? What is the Center for Constructive Communication? And we tried in this 1 minute to explain the why of 4 years ago we started the center.
Technology promised a new era of communication, but set to full blast, always on, everywhere at once. It made public conversation faster, louder, and bigger, but also distorted, noisy, and harsh. It's no wonder that only the loudest voices dominate and divide, and trust is scarce. But what if we could build something new? Design a different future for how we connect, by weaving ancient wisdoms about human connection into a new generation of tools built for understanding, not overwhelming, for scaling, but only at the speed of trust. Technologies that turn up the values, not just the volume.
So one of the ideas that we've been working with over the last few years is moving from large-scale conversations to small circles of trust, where you're able to share your personal experiences and perspectives with a facilitator. And in fact, some of you participated in a pre-event conversation. This is an experiment in trying to use this method and bring voices into this room today and over the day. So this is the prompt that was one of the prompts in the conversation. If you participated in you don't have to stand up this time, just put your hand up nice and high if you're part of it. Look at that, that's amazing. So thank you for taking that additional hour. So what we were able to do is, given all of the perspectives you shared, we ran this process with some of our tools of sense-making so that we could actually create a feedback loop, not just with those who participated, but this larger community. And so as I run out of time, I bought 3 minutes from my timekeeper, Kathy. I'm going to play a 3-minute medley of just some of the hopes and concerns that came up from voices that are here in this room.
When I talk in my social circles, everybody's really, really worried right now. There's anxiety that's palpable.
I mean, one of the worries is everything is moving in that direction of less human connection.
Are we just going to lose interest in actually talking with each other and asking each other questions as opposed to asking the AI the question?
I'm worried about my kids. How will the integration of AI into our daily lives shape the social skills, the empathy, the emotional intelligence of younger generations?
I often wonder, the pace at which we are advancing with the technology is kind of like outpacing everything else in terms of how we're addressing all of this.
The whole prospect of technology providing more and more speed-ups of things that we do. The whole business of figuring out what's right and wrong or good or bad is somehow removed from the field of actual human judgment.
Can technology enable humans to be their best selves or diminish their humanity?
Artificial intelligence, machine learning, we're on this nice edge in that context between, will it create more human apathy and alienation? Or can it create a sense of freedom and more space for social and human engagement?
If one does really focus and think creatively, there's extraordinary potential. It all so much though depends on that bridge, and that's the human quotient.
It's not this disembodied robot from the future that's coming in. It's something built by humans that humans have to decide what to do with next for the sake of the world that we all care about so much.
I've been thinking a lot about AI as a collaboration aid, as a consensus building aid, as a decision-making aid, as a preference gathering tool.
Can we be ensuring that the kind of technology we're bringing into different spaces are there to enhance the human connections, to be helping people to build trust with one another, to listen to one another, for people to feel heard?
How can we harness the power of technology to better deliver services and build trust and build the strength of that relationship and creating the conditions for thrive communities?
It's not a time to do something that's a half measure. This seems like a time where we have to really take some chances.
We all have different concerns, with different hopes, with different dreams. I think we need to be quick on our feet and always remember that these tools are here to make us be smarter how do we stay human while the world around us is changing?
So I think that really nicely sets the context and the questions that are on our minds as we enter into the day. So we have 3 fireside chats: democracy, truth, and listening. And we're going to now shift to our first. And so as Martha and Melody and Andrew take the stage, Andrew has told me to keep my intros super brief, so I'm going to have to curtail. Martha Minow is a faculty member at Harvard Law School. She's a university professor, which is Harvard's highest honor, a renowned expert on human rights and advocacy law, a mentor to many Harvard School students over the years, including Barack Obama. And I'll just stay on a personal note. She's been an extraordinarily important mentor to me and to, by extension, many in C3 and Cortico, just helping us understand how we can best situate ourselves and try to create the right connections for change. Melody Barnes is the founding executive director of the University of Virginia's Karsh Institute of Democracy. The institute was established, I think, in 2021. Right. Pretty new institute that studies, defends, and invigorates the institutions, practices, and cultural underpinnings that are the foundation of democracy. And Andrew Heyward is a nationally known news executive. He spent 10 years as president of CBS News. And I'll just add 2 personal notes. One is Andrew was the first. I thought we'd been working for 10 years. We discovered yesterday, it was 15 years ago, the importance of local news, local communities, local networks, and it took me years to appreciate why Andrew was pointing to the future we need to be worried about. And the last thing I'll say is he definitely has the title amongst our extended family of being the quickest wit, continuously coining new phrases on the fly, and so I do expect you to do that in the next 40 minutes. And
we plan to mint some new cliches that'll be tired by the end of the day. So thank you very much, Deb, and thank you so much, Melody and Martha, for being here. Lovely setting, sunlight streaming in, and we're sitting by this crackling fire for our chat. So I want to change the mood by asking you, as we talk about the high-level themes that brought us all into this beautiful room, when you think about democracy, which both of you do all the time, what keeps you awake at night? Melody, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. It's great to be here with you all and to be with Andrew and with Martha. I was thinking about this question, and in many ways, I think it's not a question of what keeps me awake at night. It's like, do I ever sleep at this point? There's so many, I feel like an ad for a Calm app or something. But when I think about it, I think about 2 sides of the same coin, I believe. One is that there are a number of people who think that democracy is inevitable, that it is like the air that we breathe, that it's just going to be there. That concerns me. And at the same time, it also concerns me that a number of people think that democracy is just not worth a damn. It's not worth saving, protecting. The values, the principles don't mean anything, and therefore it is not worth fighting for. And certainly there's no question that democracy has always been challenged. And there are contemporary and age-old problems and challenges that sit with the acting on those values and those principles and the aspirations of democracy. But I think that so many of those things are connected to the way that institutions have been enacted, the way that practices have been carried out, the culture of democracy, which I think sits at the top of the mountain, everything else flows down from it, and the social and economic conditions that ultimately do make democracy possible. Those things have been challenged from the beginning, and at the same time, we have seen the expansion of human freedom. We have seen, the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but we have the tools to make change. We have the tools to move closer to those aspirations, but if we don't address the challenge of authoritarianism and its rise right now, we put ourselves in a position where we're not able to act on, to use those tools to improve our democracy, to make it feel for people as though it works for them, to make sure our institutions and practices are more robust. And that starts, I think, with ensuring that our culture, the body politic, is in fact healthy.
We'll get more into specifics of some of those preconditions, which both of you mentioned in our earlier chats, but let's hear about Martha's insomnia first, and then we'll dive deeper.
You know, it's such a privilege to be here, and I already learned from Melody. I actually am worried more than anything about people's lack of hope. When I talk with my students and I say, "Are you hopeful?" most of them say no. I don't know how we can actually build a future if we don't have that. Mm-hmm. And so much of it is about having some belief that the tools that we have can help us get where we want to go. Who's the we disagree, et cetera. But if you don't even have that sense of a future, that is possible. I really am very worried about that. Look, I'm worried about the election in November. I'm worried about the deep fakes that are already out there and the ones that are going to drop. This is going to be the year of more democratic elections happening around the world than ever in history. I worry it may be the end of democracy. But it may be the end without people knowing it. Mm-hmm. Because there will be the form, there will be elections, but there will be elections of people who don't believe in democracy. You know, democracy is not even mentioned in the US Constitution. The framers didn't actually believe in self-government. So, you know, we've been broken in profound ways from the start, not just slavery, although that's a pretty big one. I think that the sense that there's no hope is related to a sense that we don't know history, and we don't know that we have come a long way. But who's the we? I still am struggling with that. Is there a shared future? Do we have a shared reality? I don't sleep.
Okay. You know, no wonder your students are worried about hope. So Deb and I had the pleasure of talking to each of you separately, and both of you before this, as we dragooned you into this, and you both had strikingly similar phrases, which I'll play back, and I'd like to have you briefly elaborate. So Martha, what you said was, what are the preconditions for constitutional democracy to be successful, and what do you do about the obstacles? And Melody, you said, what are the social and economic conditions that make democracy possible? And again, you weren't together. So I'm wondering, why don't we start with you, Martha? Just again, briefly, because we have a chance to explore whatever you think is most important, but sort of what went wrong? What are the conditions, and what are the ones that seem to be right now frayed or maybe even broken?
So again, the US system was never really designed as a democracy. It was designed actually for a limited number of people to be governing other people. But there were some pretty gorgeous words in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution, and I spend my days trying to make them have some living reality. I think that the preconditions include a sense of a we and a project, a belief in the possibility of there being mutual respect sufficient so that the dignity and equality of other human beings is both the necessary precondition and the goal of the enterprise. I think education, some kind of education, and something that you've spent your life on, Andrew, is access to information, access to knowledge, news, we used to call it in those quaint days, and a reason to trust in it. And I am right now very preoccupied with guns. Why? Because I think that if you live in a world in which you can't be confident that you or your children will live for the rest of the day, not only can you not have a democracy, you can't have a society. The reason it's a problem for democracy is if the vast majority of people say we want to have gun control and they can't get it, then you can't have a democracy because people don't believe that this enterprise can actually achieve any of the things that everybody thinks it should do. So I think those are, for me right now, immediate ones. Of course, a sense of if there's an election, you respect the results. If there is any kind of conflict, you actually try to use words rather than violence. But those might be true for many kinds of systems.
Ditto. Okay. Plus one.
Plus one. I also think, and I go back, I think about James Baldwin. And one of the things that Baldwin wrote about decades ago was that the idea, the philosophy of democracy at the time of the Declaration was already being bandied about. You had the Scottish Enlightenment, you had French Enlightenment, et cetera. But what was unique to America was the idea that we were all here together. Whether you are Native American, whether you were here as indentured, enslaved, European, we were all here together. And what makes America unique, and this goes to Martha's who's the we, what makes America unique is the idea that from the beginning, we were a multi-ethnic, multiracial country. So the commitment to the idea of a multi-ethnic, multiracial democracy and making that work, that's what makes America unique. And I think that is a precondition to making this experiment work today. I also think about the economic side of this. When you don't know where your 2 cents are coming from that you can rub together, it is hard to believe that you can participate and that participation in democracy will mean something, that it is actually working for you. And it is one of the things, not everything, but one of the things that I think fuels the anger that exists and the sense of isolation, this doesn't work for me. And in the complexity that is our world, I need something simple, I need something straightforward, I need somebody to tell me something that is going to work.
So how did that happen? Did things get worse, or did the perception of things get worse?
Well, the problems have been sitting there from the beginning and taking different forms. I mean, just taking a snapshot, and you look at the period before the rise of the Great Society, America is coming out of World War II. America's feeling really good about itself. We've conquered fascism overseas. We're coming back. Middle-class income is rising. People are moving to the suburbs. They've got cars. They've got televisions. Wow, isn't America great? But in fact, sitting beneath the surface, America was really, really angry and very, very frustrated. And I think that's part of what the Great Society reforms, just as a moment in time, started to speak to. But everything that bubbled out of that period and people coming into American democracy that hadn't been able to participate before in greater numbers, making their voices heard. And then the system also started to respond to that. It's like, whoa, who are you? What demands are you making? I'm making a demand because I'm a citizen. Hadn't been recognized as a citizen before, not truly. So I think that the challenges were already sitting there, and at different points in time, because of that expansion of freedom, because of those steps forward, more people are able to participate, to make their voices heard, and the system, often those who were sitting comfortably, were like, whoa, what's going on now?
Yeah, I want to hear more about that, but one of my rules is when Martha Minow takes a note, call on her immediately.
Yeah.
But then I want to come back to that thing. Yeah, please.
Boy. I can't help but add to what Melody just said so well, that the acceptance that we are multi has never really been widespread. So religious freedom was another thing, at least about the American mythology. And yet, there's a movement right now to have Christian nationalism. And I don't have to explain to people in this room that there is a Supreme Court that has a kind of religiosity that we've not seen, I think, ever. So I think that sense of, the multi is critical. But I look at Deb and I think Canada gets that. If we just started with a recognition that there are different languages as opposed to people being threatened when someone isn't speaking English. I mean, so how to cultivate that? And I think it's tied with the sense of anger and resentment that is so justifiable when people don't see a future. Well, then it's very tempting to say it's because of those people. It's because of them. And that lack of a sense that, we are a we, is, I think, the source of the easy blaming that then produces divisions, that then fill the vacuum with all of the anxiety and fear So that's my note.
Mellor, you spent a lot of time in public service, including the Obama administration. And we talked a little bit about how politics today makes it harder to achieve the goals that you and Martha are alluding to. You talked about the timeline of elections and so on. So why aren't politicians stepping up to help? Is that the most naive question in the world? Why aren't politicians stepping up to help with what you've identified, both of you, so eloquently?
Well, top line democracy, and I think we've all seen and heard this, or I won't assume, many of us might agree to this. Democracy itself, the word, has become weaponized. And it means different things to different people. Recently, I'm part of a coalition that the Karsh Institute is part of, called More Perfect, recently did some polling. And it's interesting to see when people talk about democracy, what they mean by it, and where they see the problems. And politics, and I spent most of my career here, so I will stand up, raise my hand and say it, politics is a lagging indicator. Politicians and politics are often a response to what's going on in broader society, and often, most of the time, people are looking to be reelected, so they're responding to what they see among their constituents. And then we have all the things that go into who becomes your constituent, and the self-sorting that we do, the places we choose to live, and as a result of that, the way districts are organized. And then you lay the drawing of lines on top of that. And as a result, who do you have to talk to? Who do you have to get approval from to keep your office? And I spent many years in Congress. There were definitely times, and I can remember them, and I'm proud to have seen them, where people stood up and said, you know what? I'm not doing that. I'm swimming upstream, the salmon's swimming upstream because I think it's the right thing for democracy. It's the right thing to be on the right side of history. But that is what most people find to be a challenging thing to do, and as a result, politicians are not going to necessarily be responsive. It's one of the things I loved my career in policy and politics. I worked for wonderful people, including a former senator who used to represent the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But in wanting my desire to do this work, I felt it was necessary to get out of 2, 4, and 6-year cycles. They're too short to address the problem, and politics isn't. Politicians need to step up, but that's not the place that I would begin the conversation.
And just very quickly, because I want to get to Martha, but we talked earlier about the idea that politics has been forced into the performative rather than the non-performative space. So maybe behind the scenes in the cloakroom, they're saying, I'm going to do the right thing, but then they go out and the cable news networks are there and...
Yeah, and C-SPAN's there, woo. So, you know, you've got...
Never thought
of
C-SPAN as scary before, but now I will.
Yeah, I thought only my mother was watching. And she calls us, goes, sweetheart, you didn't put on any lipstick. But, you know, people are reacting and performing and trying to meet a constituency and donors and supporters. So that can make it challenging.
Martha, you alluded briefly to journalism, but media writ large, and you know, social media is part of the title of this conference that we're at today. What do you see as the trend there that has contributed to this more fragile state that we're in now? Both the rise of social media, the fragmentation of traditional media, and so on, because I know you spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Thanks for your help on that. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Saving the News, and now it seems quaint. And that was just a couple of years ago. I mean, we're losing newspapers at a rate of 2.5 per week in this country. It used to be, you know, when de Tocqueville came to America, he said, I've never seen so many people reading news. And now, you know, most people get their news digitally, and most of that is from social media, and most of that is not news. Most of that is gossip or what somebody heard. We've always had gossip, we've always had rumor, but the sense of not living in a shared reality has never been on such steroids as now because of algorithmically designed different echo chambers that we're in. So I think that sense of what is the information ecosystem, you know, Yuval Harari, Sapiens. How many people read Sapiens? I mean, that's
You
why.
can admit it. You can admit it. Okay.
Okay, so he makes the argument that what makes human beings different than other species is not our opposable thumbs, it's not our sense of humor, it's our ability to tell and believe stories. Because if we tell and believe stories, then we can actually trust someone we've never met who knows those same stories. And then he tells the story of religion, law, and money, banking, and how those stories have allowed people to cooperate and collaborate and to force multiply, which is what civilization is. And I don't think we have shared stories.
There's an intellectual tension between these two ideas of a shared reality and then of the ability of the individual to be herself and fully express herself in ways that she couldn't do before. And I just, I don't know, like, what went wrong? Why can't those things be reconciled? Is that because, there are too many incentives to divide people and scare them? What do you think about that? It strikes me that fear, we haven't even used that word, and we're going to pivot to hope eventually, I promise. But fear is a major factor in what we're talking about. People are, and you alluded to it when you talked about religion. I just read this excellent book by Tim Alberta, who's the son of an evangelical pastor, called, you'll tell me exactly what it's called, Claire, but it's The Power of the Glory, Kingdom, the Power and the Glory, and it's about the politicization of the evangelical church. It's exactly what you talked about. Something that was inclusive and based on the teaching of Jesus has become highly politicized now because people, I think, are scared of losing what they have. But I'd love to, I'm the moderator. You're the one supposed to talk. So I'll shut up and hear your ideas.
Yeah, I think fear, isolation, loneliness. David Brooks has a new book called How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Deeply and Deeply Being Seen, being deeply seen. And he talks about the correlation between those who are now, often active in politics, are often those who are, or look to politics as a place for community, are often those who have felt isolated, who feel lonely, who are very, very angry, and look to politics as a way to not only answer a question, but to find a group of people who have similar kinds of anger and fear, and that is driving our political narrative, as opposed to a narrative of aspiration and hope and a sense of a commonality and a common culture. I mean, what is it? The sociologist whose name I can't remember right now, that culture is the story about ourselves that we tell ourselves about ourselves. If we tell that story broadly, if we see it as a broader democratic culture, a broader body politic, that it's an opportunity for us to come together to move toward a more common set of goals and objectives, but we have so siloed it, given the media influences that we're getting, given the silos that we're living in, given the way that we live, the lack of the civic muscle that we are not exercising, all the ways that we've divided and chopped ourselves up, and that's also fueling our politics and policy to the degree that we are getting policy solutions today.
One of my pet peeves is moderators who say, we're going to throw it open for questions, and then never do it. I am not that person. So in about 5 minutes, we're going to throw it open for questions. So A, think about your questions. B, there are going to be 2 microphones, so I'm hoping one of my, or 2 of my colleagues can eventually show you where they are. So please get ready with your questions in about 5 minutes. Thank you. So Martha, both of you actually are, you're affiliated with academic institutions, to say the least. Where did the education system fall short here? Or what might you do differently if you could wave a wand and say, okay, the American education system needs to do X better over time to help alleviate some of these issues?
I might get to that, but first I want to say something else, which is that whether it's the news or the media industry or it's education, societies largely historically had elites who were the gatekeepers of power and the gatekeepers of knowledge. And certainly that's true of media, certainly that's true of higher ed. One of the great revolutions of modern media is it's interactive. So you don't have to go through the gatekeeper. But one of the crises is then you may just not actually have any shared
common culture, yeah.
Common anything. So I have a wonderful niece. She was going on a trip. I said, send me a postcard. She looked at me and she said, what? And she said, you can follow me. And she's a wonderful person.
By the way, Martha went and packed her bag.
I mean,
heard that.
Follow me. I mean, this idea that we're all celebrities and people can follow us, I haven't had the heart to tell her how hurt I was by that, but I absolutely, I want to figure out how to reclaim what was so exciting about the interactivity, about not just being a recipient, being a participant, and yet instead we can all follow each other.
I love that. My dad used to say when I go off on a trip, send me a postcard, and there I was, like wandering around some forest, like I got to find postcards and a postcard stamp. But you're exactly right.
So what about the education point? Do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, we talked about it a little bit in our chat.
Yeah, I mean, I think education, it's such a wonderful opportunity, certainly K through 12, but certainly in higher ed, for us to engage with one another and engage with people that we may have never met before, lived around before, exchanged ideas with before, and to do that in a full-throated way where we might learn something and still stay, I came in believing X, I still believe X. Or it might shift 20 degrees or 80 degrees. Or you might completely change your mind. So it is a wonderful opportunity for that. And at the same time, for some of the reasons that we were discussing before, and the fear, I think technology plays a role in this, and how conversations are conveyed or leave a room, that people are afraid of having those conversations. I know I've heard faculty and students convey those kinds of concerns, and someone will pick up on it, and then you've got the gotcha moment. And as I said to someone before, there's a Salem witch hunty kind of feel to it, as opposed to a robust conversation that can take place, and the opportunity to learn in a full-throated way.
If somebody would start making her or his way to either of the microphones, that would be great. So we can, in a room of people this smart, somebody must have a question for Melody and Martha. So please don't be shy, and I'll fill the time until you get to the microphone, but that's it.
This is a crisis time for education, because so much of education people thought was about inheriting knowledge. But now you have knowledge in your pocket, in your phone. So what are the formal institutions about? It's not about accessing information. It should be about sense-making. It should be about what Melody is saying, learning to live with other human beings and express yourself, but also change your mind based on what you hear. But there's a core that has to be reinvented if it's not about passing on the inherited knowledge of the past.
Marshall Gans of Harvard, and please introduce yourself before you ask your question.
Marshall Gans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
we worked that out before, and I thought that worked out great.
Yeah, that was terrific.
Yeah.
Hi, Melody. Hi, Martha.
Good to see you.
I just want to name what seems to me to be an elephant in the room, because the notion of democracy was to be power, kratos, by the people. Now, our electoral system has become completely monetized. I mean, alone among liberal democracies, we have no constraints on campaign spending. What that's done has been to create a political marketing industry. And politics, which is about bringing people together in ways to learn from each other and so forth properly, it's been replaced by marketing to niches, governed by message masters, not dialogue, not storytelling. Now, that's a serious problem. And it then coupled with the parallel problem that institutions of self-governance, of civil society, have largely been replaced by NGOs that are governed by the wealthy. Now, if you take the atrophy in civil society and the monetization of the political context, then the question is, where does the energy come from? Where is the energy sources to bring not just to bring people back into the process, and not idealizing the past at all, but to make politics about people and not about money. Because when you combine that with our radical inequality that's growing and growing, concentrations of power are not consistent with democracy. And if you think of wealth not as just more money, but power, then we're sitting in a very oligarchic kind of situation. Now, I'm not saying that to be gloom and doom or to make a speech, which I'm doing, but no, but to try to create a context for dealing seriously with this question, how do we not only share information, but make commitments to one another that can become the foundation of something genuinely owned by us?
Well, Melody, why don't you start? I mean, the Karsh Institute is dedicated to strengthening and preserving, enhancing democracy. I'm sure you've thought about this. Do you have a response to Marshall's comments?
Well, and it's good to see you, Marshall, and I want to thank you in advance. You're going to, I know, be speaking to our Aspen Institute group in a couple of weeks as well. A couple of things in response to that. One, trying to figure out where to begin. One, you're exactly right about the challenge and the way that it plays into power. And power will not be something that we can strip out of politics, but it is also finding new ways to give more people more power. What I have seen is, and I see this among young people in particular, a lot of energy for the engagement that you were talking about, but it runs into the brick wall of significant moneyed interest. I worked on the Hill for many years, saw that over and over again. And I think part of it is our decision, and we have to be insistent upon this, and it is hard to address the issue of how we fund our campaigns and the role that money plays in politics. Because I don't think there's a lack of energy. I just think, and it makes it harder for that energy that comes from large bodies of people to move an issue when that issue is being backed by significant moneyed interests. The power imbalance is quite significant. One of the things that we're looking at the Karsh Institute is, and this directly relates to the topic at hand, is the role that technology, the role that AI may be able to play, even as we talk about all the challenges, but can AI and technology play a role in giving more people, particularly those who are less like low propensity voters, but certainly affecting all, more information and better information faster and less through the lens of interests that have a particular desire or a particular goal or trying to manipulate a particular group of people, so that individuals in coalition can act on their own best interests, and so that they can hold elected officials accountable for the decisions that we make. We're bringing together political scientists, data scientists, historians, and others to determine whether or not such a tool can be constructed. There's a lot of interest. We're at the early stages with data scientists. There are probably people in the room who are going, oh, that's interesting, or people going, you're never going to be able to do that. But that is the objective, to try and put more information and more power in the hands of people, and to convince people that there is a reason for you to be engaged. It's not this black box that politics always appears to be for people. But that also has to go, I think, hand in glove with addressing campaign financing, which right now is an uphill battle given past Supreme Court ruling and the current construct of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I do, and I am so interested in this direction that you're going to, because I do believe that knowledge is power. I think that it's not just money that's power, knowledge is power. And Marshall, if anyone knows how to turn things around, it's you, because
no pressure, Mark.
No pressure, but the experience of actually people telling their stories and hearing them and then making a common story is something that you're a master at. I have a negative thing and a positive thing to say. The negative is, right now, the hollowing out of our system is exemplified by the use of bots, not even fancy AI, just bots, to fill the notice and comment processes of the federal government. And so you have, civil servants who have to then go through all of these comments that are generated not by human beings, they're paid for by particular moneyed interests. That's the hollowing out of our institutions. No wonder there's cynicism about the structures. The more positive thing is the studies that I've seen show that money is not winning in elections, that it's about mobilizing people who care.
Hillary Clinton is a good example of that, I'm sorry to say, in terms of spending. And please introduce yourself with your question. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Lorelei Kelly. I lead the Georgetown program on congressional modernization. So I work in the House of Representatives. And I have good news. That's very hopeful. So for the last 6 years, I've worked in and out of Congress for 24 years, always trying to rebuild the capacity that was pretty much destroyed in the mid-90s for information sharing inside of the institution itself. When I go outside in the world, I'm actually shocked at how we as a people have sort of abandoned these institutions, trash talked them, and there's given up on the fact that these institutions are miracles despite their dysfunction. I'll give you 2 examples of how things have changed just in the last couple weeks. So the Modernization Committee has passed 202 internal reform recommendations, at least 50% of which have to do with the use of technology and data for strengthening democracy and participation. People inside, I work with Democrats and Republicans still, the narrowing band of institutionalists. I mean, the Republicans I work with know good and well that they're playing this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where they have to act crazy to get elected, and then they come to DC and they want to govern. I think showing up in new and different ways with people is what we can do here. It's what Cortico and constructive conversations are. So just last Friday, Congress changed its rules to allow members to collaborate with civil society in their districts. Until then, the institution looked out at the world and everything is a conflict of interest. And that's because of rules that were developed in the last century. I sat in on a hearing last month, and the interim director of the Congressional Research Service that advises the most consequential representative body in the world had just gotten a professional Zoom license. Why? Because their conversations with staff and members were cutting off at 40 minutes. Oh, God. This is the derelict, sort of bedraggled, most powerful representative assembly in the world. It still uses 1870 document formats. The good news is that it's ahead of the curve on AI and data governance right now. I mean, there's no reason the first branch of government shouldn't be a large language foundation model for democracy. We have the publishing capacity. It's probably one of the largest in the world. So my question, especially for you, Melody, who've worked in Congress for many years, how do we get Americans to give these institutions another chance? And what are you doing to, like, both parties run against the institutions right now. At the same time, the aircraft carrier is turning, and it's these little, we call it leaning into incrementalism. It's not going to be disruptive. It's not going to be fast or breaking anything, but it's really happening. So I really hope that you're also like coming back to these institutions while they're renewing themselves.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I've been hearing some of the work about the Modernization Committee, and I think, one, we've been talking about the importance of telling the story and the importance of sharing this information more broadly so people understand what is happening. 1. 2, I think that members of and it's not just Congress, but members of deliberative bodies, whether it's your city council or your school board or Congress, also the incentives for working together, the incentives for telling the positive story about those deliberative bodies also have to change, so that is rewarded as opposed to I'm throwing the match over my shoulder to tell you how awful it is. But I think that's also combined with building the competencies and capacities of democracy. I mean, it's some of the work that we're hoping to do in working with members of the General Assembly in Virginia And we're hopeful that we are going to be able to get this off the ground. New members, you spent that first year, you know what you know what you don't know. What are the other tools that you need and ways of bringing people together across party lines to learn and to work together so that they can be better and more efficient and more effective legislators, which I think also contributes to the health of those institutions and the stories that they tell about them. And finally, I would say people need to see and feel the benefits of those institutions so that they can believe that they work. And that also goes to the story that's being told about what's coming out of them, the policy that's coming out of them, as opposed to just, it's dysfunctional, it works, nothing ever happens, it's bad. You don't need to pay any attention to this.
Thanks, Lorelei. So we're going to take another question. We only have about 5 minutes left, and then we're going to endeavor to end on a hopeful note. Elle, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Elle Luna. I'm a designer here with C3 and Cortico. And thank you for this enlivening conversation this morning. My question is about hope. And specifically, do each of you have hope?
Why don't you start? No. Go ahead.
This is a constant topic of conversation in my family. I'm a pessimist, but I have come to say I'm a hopeful one. So my husband is an optimist, and he says, I know pessimists are right, but optimists have more fun along the way. So I think we have to have hope. I mean, I do think about the future, and if I have some sense that there can be something better than what we have had in the past.
So what would you anchor your hope to?
I do actually see young people as enormous source of hope, and their idealism, and their even their desire to have things be all or nothing. I mean, that's a great wake-up call for old people like me.
Melanie?
My household is the opposite of yours. My husband's the pessimist, and I am the optimist. And I think of myself kind of Weeble-like. I mean, there are days when I definitely flop over, but inevitably I pop up, and I like you, I often look at young people. I mentioned the organization that I'm affiliated with at the Aspen Institute. It's work that we started during the Obama administration. Collaboratives of young people and others in their community. And young people come from foster care, juvenile justice system, or homeless. The list goes on and on and on. And they articulate hope. Yeah. They articulate their commitment to civic and civil society, their belief that they have a role to play and that they can make a difference and make a change. So I look at that. And quite frankly, and honestly answering the question, I think about one of my grandmothers was a tobacco factory worker and a domestic. And I worked for the President of the United States. And I'm not saying that, people could say, oh, that doesn't, but there's change does happen. And what we have to do is make that change accessible to more and more people so that is the common story. And to get up and to do that every day and to see the tools that we have to do that do sit in our founding documents, that sit in the Constitution. Imperfect, absolutely, but is the tool there? Sure. And are we better than many, many, many other societies and other forms of government? I believe so. And so I get up to fight for that. I believe we live to fight another day.
So just to end on a very, very brief and still hopeful note, so CCC's mantra, I won't have it exactly right, but seeing the humanity in one another is essential to democracy. And so I'd love to know what advice you'd give all of us as we enter this day. We're going to dive much more deeply into technology, which you both alluded to, and other themes. But if there's a sentence that you'd like us to think about as we go through the day, I'll start with you, Melody, and with Martha, and then we'll say goodbye.
I love the fact that you all work deeply on technology and your belief in what technology has to offer, which if you really knew me, like if my husband were here, he would tell you about my relationship with technology, you would run me out of this room. He's like, you touch things and they break. But that you all have that deep belief, but that you have gathered together in person to do this work. And I think taking your knowledge and your expertise and being able to engage deeply with one another in person is a way to you're modeling what needs to happen, and you have the ability to transform and to offer solutions that many of us are eager to take up, to experiment with, and to take to scale.
Oh, you have the last word, Professor Minow.
I actually get a lot of hope by being connected to the Center for Constructive Communication. And I think each of those words are what I would urge people to think about today. Communication. And if you can connect with someone here today that you didn't know by communicating, that would be a win. Constructive. I mean, that's hope right there. What can you build? What can you make? And a center. I think the amazing thing about that word is that it implies both what my niece said, follow me, center yourself, but also connect.
Thank you very much. I have a big clock here. We're on time. Thanks, and thank you so much, Melody and Martha.
Thank you.